Hello YouTube, we're out in the machine shop at the moment and I'm working on getting the tank ready. So there's going to be quite a few things that we need to do to this tank. As you can see, I've started stripping off a lot of the paint, but we've reached a particularly stubborn area, so I'm going to have to re-go over that. Now the stuff I've been using to remove the paint is this, proper industrial paint strippers. Now, as you can imagine, proper paint stripper is really nasty stuff, but it actually contains a particular chemical called dichloromethane, which is what is the active ingredient that strips paint. Unfortunately, dichloromethane is pretty nasty stuff. You get it on your hands, it stings like no one's business. It also gives off some pretty nasty fumes. So, as a result, it's been decided that it's not the sort of thing that the general public should be allowed to get their hands on. However, thanks to the power of the internet, if you do a little bit of searching, you can probably still get your hands on it. But if you do get your hands on it, make sure you follow all the instructions. So why am I using this industrial product rather than the stuff you can get from Screwfix, B&Q's and all that, things like Nitromors or their own paint strippers? The problem is those paint strippers, because they are no longer allowed to contain dichloromethane, they really just don't work on automotive paints. They may be alright for stripping the gloss off an internal door or something like that, but absolutely useless on this stuff. So, like I said, you do need to do a bit of hunting around and find yourself some proper stuff. Of course, if you are going to use this proper stuff, like I said, read all the safety precautions. And the first one is when you're using it, you need a thick old pair of rubber gloves. Okay. So I've got my gloves on. It probably doesn't hurt. Oh, excuse me. It probably doesn't hurt to actually wear a face mask, although I'm not sure how much effect that will have. And possibly some safety specs just to keep it out your eyes. Hey. Where's the fun in that? So, all you do is gloop a little bit of the product into the area you want. And you can see it comes out a bit like wallpaper paste, only a lot more potent. And then I bought some really cheap and nasty paintbrushes from the pound shop, just to spread it out with. I mean, these paintbrushes are rubbish, you wouldn't use them for painting, but for something like this, where you're spreading the paint stripper around, they're ideal. And let's be honest, once you've done this with it, it's going to be no good for anything else, it's going to end up in the bin anyway. So at £1 for a pack of 5 brushes, I think they're the ideal product for this application. Okay. So just spreading the paint stripper around. Hopefully you can already see that the paint is starting to bubble and blister. Now you may need to do a couple of applications of this, but basically put the paint stripper on, go away, have a cup of tea, and leave the paint stripper to get stuck in and do its thing. So I'm going to go and have a cup of tea, and I'm going to come back in about 10-15 minutes and we shall carry on. Okay, so I've literally just left this for about 5 minutes and you can see the paint's all bubbling up and all ready for scraping off. And the great thing is, if you actually stand next to it, you can actually hear the paint fizzing and bubbling away as it's being attacked by the paint stripper. So now, we just need to get a spatula and scrape off the paint. So you can see this tank's been quite a few colours in its time. There was obviously the silver that was on it, which we took off quite easily. Then there was a reddish colour, then a black, then a primer, and then eventually we got back down to the original Honda silver. you can see how easily the paint is just coming off. Now, as I said, you may need to give it a couple of applications to get rid of everything. But it certainly is a lot easier than tackling it any other way. So, I'm going to carry on scraping away to my heart's content and get rid of as much as possible. And then we'll come back a little bit later on. As you can see, the paint strip has done a pretty good job of getting rid of the bulk of the paint. We've still got a few stubborn areas, such as this bit here, and also some of these areas mainly around the seams. So what I'm going to have to do is resort to this chap, the angle grinder. And we're just going to go around and get rid of the worst areas. Now, there are various tools you can use in the angle grinder to do that. There's the metal flat disc or the metal strip disc. They come in either a flat or you can get a cut version. These are really good at removing paint and rust. They're pretty aggressive, and as well as doing that, their favourite pastime is shedding these little wire bristles and embedding them in your skin and your clothing, and they're really quite horrible. So I'm hoping I won't have to resort to those very much. What I'm going to use instead, for as much as I can, is this. It's a fibre strip disc, and it is designed purely for removing paint, and it actually leaves quite a nice finish on the metal as well, ready to take the primer. So I'm going to start with that. May have to resort to this just to get in some of the awkward little nooks and crannies, and then once I've stripped everything off with the angle grinder, going to get some hot soapy water, wash the tank down to get rid of any sort of remaining paint stripper residue, and give it a good drying off, and then we'll come back for the next stage. Okay, well, we've finished with the angle grinder, and I think you'll agree the tank's come up pretty nicely. Really quite pleased with that. Most of it came off with the fibre strip disc, but I did have to resort to the wire wheel ones just to get around the seams a little bit. But all in all, the tank doesn't look too bad. There's a couple of dents in it we're going to have to deal with a bit later on. But before we do that, there's just one other little job I want to do. So, around the fuel filler cap, we've got the three holes that the filler cap itself actually screws into, and I don't know how well you can see it, but we've got quite a bit of dried up paint stripper residue that's got into the holes. So first thing I'm going to do, just take a little 3mm drill bit and just by hand run it through just to clear out the worst. Obviously, we're doing it by hand, you're not going to cause any damage to the actual threads. And that's got rid of the worst of it, but I have got a little M4 tap here. I'm just going to run that through the holes. Just to clean everything up, so we've got nice clean threads. Now, obviously during the painting procedure, these are going to get all bunged up with paint again. So I'm going to have to redo this after we finish painting it. But what I don't want is to have old paint and old paint stripper still on the tank, because that could potentially react with the fresh paint. So it is worth cleaning everything out. Make sure we've just got a plain bare metal tank with nothing on it. And like I said, really quite pleased with the way those strip discs have worked. I'll be using them again. They're certainly a lot less aggressive than the wire wheels. Now I'm sure you can hear when I shake the tank, it rustles quite a lot. So let's have a look inside. What I've got is an endoscope, which is basically a very, very small camera with a load of LED lights around it, so we can have a look inside inside the tank. This one is just a cheapy eBay special, and it plugs into your laptop through a USB port. And the nice thing is, I'm kind of hoping I can actually record the footage and we can include it in the video. So we'll just wait while the laptop fires up and we'll be back. Whilst I'm waiting for the laptop to fire up, the one thing I forgot to mention is I've also taken a bit of wire and just run it down the drain tube. Again, clear out any residue of paint and filler. So here is our little endoscope, and let's take a look. Right, I'm just going to switch you to endoscope view and you can have a look. I think we can all agree that's pretty shocking in there. Pretty rusty, even though the footage wasn't that great quality. You didn't need much to show you how bad it was in there. So we're going to have to do a bit of derusting. And there are various ways you can do derusting. Some people use a soda crystal solution and electrolysis. The only problem with that is, obviously, you're running a power source to do it. And it only really works on line of sight. So you have to put an anode in there and then clip, I think it's a negative to the anode and positive to the structure. Could be the other way around, it's been a while since I've done it. But if you have the anode coming in, it's pointing towards the back of the tank, it's not going to actually work on the front of the tank. So I don't really use electrolysis much. Another solution that's often bandied about is to use white vinegar. The NC23 tank holds about 15 litres. It's not a particularly big tank, but it's not small either. So you're going to need quite a few 5-litre bottles of white vinegar, which is quite expensive. But also the reason I don't use white vinegar is it just bloody stinks. I hate the smell of it. So what do I use? Well, I use this stuff. Citric acid. Citric acid is exactly as it says. It's a very light, very low intensity acid, and this particular stuff here that I've got is actually food grade. So citric acid, one of the main uses for it, as you can tell from the fact I get it from a company called the Soapery, is to make bath bombs with. It's also used a lot in Indian cooking for their various pickles, but the main application for it is sweets. Most Haribo sweets contain this stuff. In fact, it's this stuff that gives those tang fastics that really bitter taste. It's also used a lot in squash, things like orange squash, ribena, blackcurrant squash, things like that. So the nice thing about using citric acid is it's relatively cheap. A 1 kilo bag like this costs just over £5 delivered, and you get quite a lot of use out of it, as you will see. but also it's relatively environmentally friendly. You can tip it down the drain when you're finished and it's not a problem. If it's safe enough to eat, it's not going to cause very much harm. So what you need to do is we need to take our citric acid, mix it with some water to make a solution, and then we just leave it to sit. Now it's not a fast process by any step of the imagination, but it is very effective, and I'll show you something just here. So if you bear with me, let's just move the tank for a second. And zoom you in. Okay, so this little takeaway container has got a citric acid solution in it, and I've put some rusty nuts and bolts in there. And it's been sat for about 4 or 5 days, just with the lid on the kitchen windowsill. So to give you an idea, that's what we started off with. Fairly rusty sort of bolt, rusty nut even. That's off the sprocket carrier. It then sits in this solution here, and you can see that started off as a clear solution, and you can tell by the colour of it, it's obviously been up to stuff. And here's a bracket that was pretty rusty that was in there. Now when you've finished with the citric acid solution, and you don't need a lot of citric acid, I normally mix about 10 grams of citric acid to a litre of water, so you can imagine a 1 kilo bag goes a very long way. And you can see there's our end result on this bracket. In fact, what you need to do is wash it down with some soapy water and clean it off, and then dry it off to prevent flash rusting. And there is a nut that's had 4 or 5 days in citric acid solution, and you can see it's come up almost as good as new. Certainly ready for plating, and something I want to do at a later date is actually have a go at home plating. But for the time being, I've got some cold blacking solution, so I'm just going to cold black all these to protect them. But back to the tank. I removed the fuel tap a little while ago, and I've taken a cork out of a wine bottle, and you can see I've actually had to sort of taper the end, so attacked it with a Stanley knife and a bit of sandpaper, and I'm just going to use that to block up the fuel tap hole. And I'm going to sit the tank on the workbench. I've just got a couple of old paint cans just to prop up the front and keep it level. I've also got a bucket underneath my workbench, so if we do get any leakage, I'm not going to flood out the workshop. So here's a 5 litre container, and it is literally just warm water. Actually, I need to turn this around the other way. So we've got a 5 litre container with just warm water, sort of fresh out the hot tap, and I'm just going to pour that in, and obviously spill it everywhere as you do. So just going to pour half of it in, check that there's no leaks from the fuel tap. All looks okay. And then we pour in our citric acid. Like I said, 10 grams per litre, so I've got 150 grams in here. In fact, I've put a tiny bit more in. You can use higher concentrations than the 10 grams to a litre. Some people like to use more. All it does is it speeds up the process a little bit, But to be honest, anything over 20 grams a litre and you're just wasting the citric acid. So right, I'm obviously going to have to go and get another 2 of those just to fill up the tank. But there is one more thing we want to add, and it's screen wash. Now I have been told that putting a little drop of screen wash in also helps. The theory is that the detergents in the screen wash actually just break the surface tension of the water, and it helps it bond better. I have to admit, adding it certainly does seem to have improved the results. So I've started using it every time that I put citric acid in anything. Whether it really does make a difference, I don't know, but let's be honest, screen wash is dirt cheap, so it certainly doesn't hurt. As with any chemical reaction, if you can add a bit of heat to the process, it all helps. So what I've got a cheap little aquarium heater here, and that should be set to, if I can find the dial on it, to the top. So that should be set to about 30 degrees, and it doesn't hurt to fit that in. Now this doesn't, yeah, unfortunately, because there's the cross piece just inside the tank, I can't actually get the aquarium heater in. Obviously if I was doing a large batch of stuff in a bucket, this would be perfect, but I don't really want to use this with the, I don't know, well, the element part should be totally submerged, so in theory I could use it. So I've got the aquarium heater. Like I said, it's not absolutely essential, but if you're not using an aquarium heater, then it certainly helps just to take a blanket or a couple of blankets, an old duvet or something, just wrap it over the tank to try and keep the warmth in. The chemical reaction does work better when it's warm. It also works when it's cold. Obviously, if you're doing this in the middle of winter in your workshop, you'll definitely need the aquarium heater. So that's it. I'm going to go and fill this up now. I'm going to leave it to fizz away for a week or so. Then we'll come back with the endoscope and we'll see what the end results are. So, see you in a week's time.